Good morning, everybody. I would like to welcome you today to our first EMNES Union for Mediterranean Regional Stakeholder Dialogue webinar on the Blue Transition Scenario 2050 for the Mediterranean. And this we are trying also today to discuss the TRIS development model. So let me just give a small introduction before we start. The Euro-Mediterranean Network for Economic Studies was founded in 2015 with the support of European Union, and it is a collaborative and innovative regional network of 30 economic and policy regional organizations from different parts of the Mediterranean, and they are all together working on a renewed vision of socioeconomic development in the region. 2020 has been a very important milestone for the network, following 5 productive years of work and research work and co-creation of collaborative knowledge over the years. So what we have developed beyond the research that has been done over the 5 years was a comprehensive policy roadmap building on a blue transition vision, which we have developed, which is built itself on 2 very fundamental pillars. One is the blue transition scenario, and the second is the TRIS model for development, which I will go into details later on. And these are all guided by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. And we also published a study for all of this in April 2020. And in fact, it will be the subject of the dialogue of today. Now, the objective of this webinar is to, in fact, reflect and share views on the key challenges that need to be tackled in the region in terms of trying to advance new models of job creation, transparent governance, responsible citizenship and social inclusion, sustainable development, and regional integration within this model of blue transition. Also, this meeting is allowing an interaction with the representatives of the network, external experts, but also UfM, Union for Mediterranean officials and representatives from international organizations, civil society, and the private sector as well. Also to discuss the relevance and the applicability of this framework and policy roadmap. A series of dialogues will be organized in the upcoming months. Now, I would like very much to thank the Mediterranean Secretariat, GIZ, and the Union and the Euro-Mediterranean, of course, Economists Association for organizing this first dialogue. I would like to welcome with us today His Excellency Nasser Kamel, the Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean, to give the opening speech. Nasser, the floor is yours.
Very much, my dear Reem, for allowing me the opportunity to participate with you in this webinar, and as an example of the excellent collaboration we have with your network, and to discuss a very important subject, of course, which is the blue transition scenarios for our region. We're very glad actually to be able to co-organize this with the Euro-Mediterranean Network of Economic Studies, EMNES, who you Reem know very well, has been a strategic partner of the UfM and whom we support and follow very closely. Our other partner is, of course, our very strategic partner, which is GIZ, and the German Ministry of International Cooperation. This webinar is bringing together actually renowned experts from the whole region, and more specifically from the UfM Secretariat, your network, and the OECD and other regional and international organizations, to try to discuss, as you mentioned rightly, models of social and economic development in an inclusive way, job creation, which is one of the biggest challenges our region is facing, and of course, sustainable development and regional integration. All that within what we hope to be a blue transition in our region, one that is firmly anchored in a context of a strengthened regional integration. We all, of course, I don't need to tell you, we have this webinar today at a time where the region is facing an unprecedented challenge, and this year happens to be also the year of our 25th anniversary, the anniversary of the Barcelona process, which eventually led to the creation of our Union for the Mediterranean. And also, as far as you are concerned, in EMNES, this year is a milestone in terms of 5 years of intense research that yielded, of course, a remarkable policy roadmap that was published early this year and which we receive and study with great enthusiasm. But we all know also that this year is the year where the pandemic has hit. Yeah? And unfortunately, our region has been among the most affected regions in the world. And this pandemic has led to an aggravation of existing trends, especially in terms of inequalities within our member states, but also between our member states, North and South, and even North and South of Europe, if I may say so. And this happened within a landscape of economic fragmentation in the region and lack of economic integration. We are, as you all know, one of the least economically integrated regions in the world. So I believe all of us, I mean all of us who are here today and even beyond, have to focus on using this challenge and this crisis also to try to steer the policymakers in our region towards rethinking their economic policies and refocusing them on increased inclusive model of development, but also on one that is based on regional integration. You've all been following, and you are the experts, I'm the bureaucrats here, so we've been following closely this whole debate about supply chain and the exposure. We have all came to realize of our economic and production facilities and systems and our dependence on very few sources, mainly in Asia. I read the other day that 500 of the 800 largest industrial company in the world do get a percentage of their supply from the Wuhan region, not only from China, but from the region itself, which was the first outbreak of this pandemic. So the debate is ongoing about maybe this is the time not to move from a global or globalized economic model, but to think also about the need for onshoring part of that supply chain, ensuring a certain level of self-reliance at a regional scale. I don't know, these are questions I'm asking you, the experts, but I feel it is the right time to look into them. The other big question, which is a subject of your discussion today, is what type of economic model, of integration we need to pursue. And as so many people in the European Commission have said, and others, if we are rebuilding, we need to build better. And building better means, of course, greener, bluer, and low emission recovery. I think these are the two priorities that we need to look into it in the years ahead. All of that, of course, is within our mandate as a regional organization, which is promoting regional cooperation and integration, and which has always been guiding our strategic compass year after year. As you know, ANREEM has been a partner of the UfM for many years. We've been mandated by our member states in 2017 to look and to map and to do an extensive diagnostic of the state of play of regional integration in the Mediterranean. And we all know, as I said earlier, it is one of the least integrated region in the world. And your network, Dr. Reem, EMEA, has been actually crucial in defining the specific performance indicators that served as the foundation for the work that followed to prepare this extensive report that we're collaborating in with the OECD, which we intend to share it with our member states during the next regional forum that hopefully, if the circumstances allow, will be held in November in November of this year. That's mainly what I wanted to share with you today in terms of our keen interest in the blue transition as a number one priority area of our work. Within that, of course, we develop and we promote anything that has to do with the circular economy, digital and creative economy, which is actually one of the creative economy is proving to be an extremely important component of our economic landscape in the region. And of course, climate action to deal with the region that is one of the most affected by the phenomena of climate change in our world. So without further ado, I would like to thank all of you for being here today. I'm sure your discussion would be rich in terms of knowledge, in terms of guiding our work, in terms of giving us policy recommendation that we could adopt or at least present and defend within and with our member states and draw useful lessons and useful conclusion out of it. So I wish you a fruitful discussion, inspiring exchanges, and I look forward to be able in the future, in the near future, to see you all physically again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, about for your comments, and I thank you very much also, and would like to congratulate you and all the stakeholders working on the Euro-Mediterranean partnership of 25 years of Barcelona process. I think the Barcelona process has been a milestone for integration, although the results of integration, especially South-South integration, have not been the ones expected. We can always say that the Barcelona process has been a great achievement 25 years ago. And I think I agree that the pandemic has created further challenges to rethink the regional integration model. But again, more research needs to be done to really understand which are those integration models that need to be put forward. And specifically with the experience that we have seen over the last few months, exceptionally, in fact, that all the global value chains and global supply chains have been disrupted globally. But also thank you very much for mentioning the role of EMNES in developing the quantitative indicators to assess regional integration, which in fact will be, say, this research will be continued and enlarged to develop further indicators and finalizing, I would say, or refining those indicators with better quality data. Now, I would like to give a first introduction on, in fact, the blue transition scenario 2050 and the TRIS economic model. So I will have a few minutes to introduce this and to start the discussion for the second part of this webinar. So let me first introduce what we have tried to do over the 5 years within the EMNES, but this effort did not start at the EMNES network research, but even before, with a network that we have worked on together, also some of the team members, called MEDPRO. So what we try to do in EMNES is to, Kinga, can you please put the slides? So what we try to do is to provide a renewed vision for socioeconomic development in the Mediterranean countries, mainly focusing on employment creation, social inclusion, and sustainable development. In fact, when we started the research, the level of unemployment, especially for youth and women, has been quite high. So put the first slide. So what we try to do in here is to provide new avenues for Euro-Mediterranean partnerships, which in fact, as I mentioned, started by the vision, which you see here in this slide, anchored in the blue transition scenario, which in fact we have developed it in with my colleague with us today, Carlo Sessa, in 2011 and 13. So it's almost 10 years ago. And then this concept of blue transition, as you see here, the blue prospect, the arrow that goes down, it's in fact allowing us to build this new vision back then in 2011 for a horizon 2030. And then later on, from 2015 under the EMNES, we try really to put some flesh on this blue transition scenario that we will explain today, when in fact we have already published this report, this study in April 2020. So the blue transition scenario, as you see it here, next slide please, is really a concept that is based on a co-development philosophy of several distinct regional areas surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. The EU from the north, the South-South cooperation, as you see it there, but also going beyond the frontiers of the Mediterranean and thinking about the centrality of the Mediterranean as a whole. So for us, the blue prospect is really anchored in the blue of the Mediterranean. It's not only the blue economy, so it goes beyond the blue economy. So blue economy, green economy, digital economy, but we call it blue simply because it is the blue of the Mediterranean. So it goes beyond the blue economy, which is the debate that is happening today within the region. Now, this blue prospect, as I mentioned, which is this arrow that goes down in the previous slide, is a transition to a balanced, responsible, sustainable, inclusive development that seems increasingly far when we see the pandemic today and how things have been really separated with the restriction of mobility and then the social distancing, the lockdown. So it seems that we are far in terms of in terms of the physical aspect of it. But then digitally, we are not so far anymore. So then you see, we are almost speaking and meeting pretty much every day. So this was a great innovation, which in fact has made us very close. But this is also, I think that we are nowadays in the Mediterranean far from the current, what I call favorable trends. So we need to move forward to, and far from this, what we called before in 2013, the red transition and the Mediterranean under conflict. So the next slide, please. Now, what we have added here within our thinking is the blue transition vision. So the blue transition vision is, in fact, adding the new TRIS model, as you see it here. The TRIS model is adding 4 key principles, which are the transparent governance, the inclusive, the responsible living, the inclusive economy, and the sustainable energy and development. So these are really very important 4 principles which we try to mainstream on the economic model that we would like to develop, or we have already developed in our research. So this TRIS model, and I think it is a very important response to the what I call the prosperity paradox. In fact, the digital age is bringing many opportunities, many possibilities for innovation and economic progress. But prosperity, we've seen it in many reports, has in a way stalled the wage, for example, the wage growth. So there has been a wage stagnation, youth unemployment has been rampant, but also inequality, and you mentioned it, is widening. And these trends have been accelerated with the pandemic. I think this prosperity paradox with a pandemic, this external shock, has gone, accelerated these trends, and will accelerate these trends if there wouldn't be very, I would say, bold safety net from the different countries and so on. But also this TRIS model is coping with the acceleration of the new technologies and discoveries. For example, the blockchain technology, more automation and so on. But these are all disruptive factors on the society and the economies, which will push us to think further into strategies of adaptation, further development, and redesigning what has been done over the past decades. But also, and this is the third point, which I think I wanted to share with you, it can serve as a model to enhance resilience. We've been discussing in a previous webinar how to move from efficiency to resilience. Efficiency did not, of course, it served for many years in an extreme capitalist model, but then we need to move into a more reviewed capitalist model, which is built on resilience. So in fact, what we're trying to do here is to develop this new thinking for the Mediterranean. Next slide, please. Now, again, this new model is trying to first promote the dialogue between different civilizations, because in the Mediterranean, as you could see in the previous slide, there were many groups involved, and of course this needs to be preserved in a diverse model of different cultures, different religions, different identities, and so on and so forth. And of course, if we don't move into a prosperity model and peace model, otherwise we might end up in clash of civilization. The second one is the adherence to a common project, which is the Mediterranean Partnership, or for the Mediterranean Partnership. I think because we are going away from the same geography that we have known many years. So this project has to be multidimensional, flexible, differentiated model of regional integration, which is based on win-win philosophy. So the win-win philosophy will attract the different players to work together for the Mediterranean and also for the regions surrounding the Mediterranean, including African regions, and also building regional strategies which are based on shared actions that will build, in fact, or underpinned into this TRIS model that we are talking about. So you see it here, the TRIS model, it's really a way to think about the future we want. And this future we want, you can see in the slide, in the graph at the left, the future we want, the heart of the construction that we would like to develop. And this has been done based on what I call a methodology which has developed, I mean, of course, it's a methodology that exists, the 3-horizon methodology, which simply says that there are different horizons. There is the inertia scenario, which things continue as they are. I mean, for example, if we take the green transition, if we want to move into transition, we need to move from the inertial scenario, which is the H1, to the transformative scenario, which is the H3. So we want to really have a system which is going today from an extractive acquisitive resources, which is, as I mentioned, H1, to a circular way to use energy and natural resources. So it's really greening the economy, which is happening in many countries, for example, in Europe, but then at a very low speed, and it needs to be accelerated. And I think the pandemic and the COVID-19 responses and mitigation actions that have been put in place should move us quicker than anticipated into this green transition toward a Horizon 3 model. The second is economic transition. So I mentioned before this efficiency thinking, it's dominant capitalist model, which is based on corporations, enhancing value creation, and then pushing efficiency to the maximum of the, I would say, to the maximum, to the extremes. We need to move into a distributed type and inclusive type of capitalist and capitalism model, which is built on resilience rather than, of course, we have to keep efficiency, but not to extremes. The third point of the transition is the societal transition, as you see it there as well, and from an extreme mode of consumption to more responsible forms of consumptions and lifestyle. And I think this, we have seen it, in fact, and has been accelerated again with the pandemic that we've seen over these months. And then obviously governance. Governance, and the main issue here is to move governance from a centralized, opaque leadership to more, I would call it horizontal, democratic, cooperative, built on transparency, empowered by digitalization. I think digitalization could be an opportunity in this case. All of this, what I'm talking about, is also underpinned in the SDGs. So next slide, please. The SDGs that you can see them here. I'm sorry, you don't see the SDGs. Okay. I don't know why. I think they disappeared. So normally the SDGs are all surrounding this graph. So then.
No, it's an Rim. It's an animated slide.
See,
okay. It's
yes.
Animated. The four groups.
Yeah, but I tried to make them static. So
okay.
All right. So these are coming here. Actually, we should have done it the opposite, because the SDGs have been there, and we created the heart of these SDGs about what we call the future we want. So as you see it here, we are talking about 2030, but our thinking, and you can see the round, the blue round, that's the blue transition that we're talking about. That's the 2050 thinking that we are trying to develop, and we tried that. So this is why I'm going to now go into the TRIS application. So the TRIS application, the next slide. Now, this TRIS application, we made an application on Lebanon, and it is a paper which we have published a couple of weeks ago to really put a TRIS model into a real context, delivering what we call a responsible innovation strategy, which in fact embedded or brings down this responsible citizen behavior. So I would like to give the floor now to Sandra to give 5 minutes of her presentation on the case of Lebanon, just to give you a flavor how this, I would call it theoretical thinking, is declined into an application for a country. And then of course it can be applied for other countries, but we have this case, specific case of Lebanon. And then I come back with my slide, Kinga, because I have a couple of more slides, and then I give the floor to Cynthia. Sandra, please, the floor is yours. 5 minutes.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So I'm very happy to present to you the application of the TRIS model that we did on the Lebanon case. So the challenges facing Lebanon are very severe, actually. So We have the COVID-19 health crisis with a strict lockdown between mid of March and end of April. But the problem is that not only the health crisis, but the country has been facing a compound of crises, from the refugee crisis, the political crisis, the economic contraction. And more recently, we have a social unrest starting October 2019 with a mistrust with the political leaders. And we have a banking and currency crisis. Today, the value of the currency is devaluated of 80%. We have a debt crisis with a declaration of default in March 2020. And so as you imagine, the coronavirus, the COVID-19 crisis could not occur at a worse timing for the country. So we tried to put all the challenges facing the country into 4 categories. For the governance part, well, the challenges remain in a sectarian system that fosters corruption, inefficient decision-making processes, absence of accountability. On the social side, we have an increasing unemployment rate, a fragile healthcare and educational system, absence of social safety net, and today more than 50% of the population is estimated to be under the poverty line. For the economic challenges, we have dual deficit problem, high uncertainty on account deposits, hyperinflation and currency devaluation, strong reliance on imported goods, and lack of reliable data on the economic and the social. On all the sides, we don't have any reliable data. And the environmental challenges remain in an unsustainable management of waste, of electricity. We have inefficient management and also polluting energy. So all of these challenges are difficult, to think of, but Lebanon was always associated with the phoenix, which is a bird that is reborn from its own ashes. So we try to rethink on the future of Lebanon we want, and especially today the country is seeking assistance from international partners and from the IMF. So it was a unique opportunity for us to think of the future we want. And we used the TRIS development model in order to implement it in the case of Lebanon. So with parachuting it into the reality. So for the transparent governance side, we need to activate accountability mechanisms by applying and updating the existing regulations. And also technology can be a key by using e-governance and implementing a national identification code for all citizens in order to have a better transparency and also to be able to access at the social level for safety nets. So for the responsible living, we thought of it into shifting into a proactive citizenship with an important role of education, NGOs, and unions. There is a need to reinforce the national identity rather than the sectarian one in the case of Lebanon, while focusing on the cultural activities and the increasing of public spaces where people can meet and work together, and on providing the social safety net with universal healthcare and retirement plans that are inexistent in Lebanon. For inclusive economy, we focused on the regional integration, but also on the diversification of the economy with a shift towards a productive economy and focusing also on the knowledge-based economy and the creative sector that have high potential in Lebanon. A fairer redistribution policy and social dialogue, on improving the economic data with the integrated national database. And also on the financing side, there is a need to support MSMEs via guarantee schemes and liquidity in foreign currency, but also to benefit from the blockchain revolution and alternative funding. On the sustainable energy and development and environmental goals, we focused mainly on 2 points. the assessment of the current projects to disengage from the polluting ones and improve the skills for maintenance for the existing ones, and the improving the environmental engagement of the country via a national plan for environment and implementing public transportation plans. So the idea is that for each of the TRIS development model, we put a roadmap on the short term, mid-term, and long term. And this path engages all stakeholders, citizens, institutions, NGOs, academics, international community, and the diaspora. And you can also download the paper on the EMEA website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. This was really 5 minutes. I was counting the number of minutes. So now we, Kinga, back to my presentation. So I continue the next part. So what we have tried to do here is just to give you a flavor of one application. So we, of course, this TRIS model is multidimensional, and we could apply it to the region, to the countries, and also to specific themes. And this is what we will do. We have done already within the EMNES research. But before going to the policy transition roadmaps, and this is what we have tried to develop over the past 3-4 years of EMNES research, I would like to give the floor to Cynthia, who has been the leader of the EMNES Academy, which in fact, I would now call it the Blue Transition Academy, if you allow me, Cynthia. Please, the floor is yours, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Rim, and good morning to everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today to share some thoughts with you. As Rim mentioned, my intervention will be mostly to basically to make some reflections and to share with you some insights about the process which we have applied within the EMNES network. So EMNES was born as a project funded by the European Commission, some 5 years ago, even a little bit more. And I have to recognize that Rim has always had very strategic view with a very long-term perspective, which it takes some time, a little bit at the beginning to understand where she wants to go. But then when you start to get on the way, the objectives become really very clear. And I think this original idea of having a network where basically there is a combination of view from South and North Mediterranean, which are not adding up, but they're really integrating together, which is really, if you want, embeds the overall idea of coming up with integrated models about the future of the Mediterranean, was really applied to the process that we built. And in fact, in this, there was a real learning process because we had young researchers, young economists from the south and the north of the Mediterranean. We wanted to combine their views and their understanding of their own countries and come up with policy proposals, policy options, which could basically improve this process of integration and overall of prosperity. And basically what we came up with, it was the idea of having policy workshops. Basically, we had 3 of them where we convened with about 25 people and stayed together for 3 to 5 days, where we discussed basically the results of fundamental research, of economic research, and we tried to come up with policy implications and policy conclusions which are actually relevant in the current context, and with the aim, of course, of improving integration process in the Mediterranean. This has been sometimes a bumpy way, because this, of course, is not easy. But I think we have achieved, I would say, at least 3 very important objectives. The first one, we really created a very united group of people. There are also very strong personal relations. We realized that the best way to integrate is to know each other, and you need to have the opportunity to have exchanges of ideas, but also about culture, and to have better understanding. understanding of similarity and dissimilarities to try to find where the common points are, because this makes you strong. And last but not least is really to come up with policy options, policy recommendations. I think that the example which has been presented by Rim with the TRIS model and the application to Lebanon is the best example, a concrete example of our achievement. So to come up with ideas which have really a policy application. And I think this was really for us the ultimate objective, and I'm really glad to see how it is materializing now. And if you want, this allows us to create a process, a structure, which is not linked to a single challenge or to a single problem or to a single situation, but it's something which is durable and which becomes basically a generalized approach for the group. So I think this is very important, and it's basically for this reason that we are very determined actually to continue with this policy workshop or academy, as Rim likes to call them, where there is an element, of course, of capacity building, of common understanding, and coming up with policy implications which are based on fundamental research, which is done by the members of the team. I think I will leave it here. This, I think, for me, it was the most important points to share with you when it comes to the process. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, for this introduction. Kinga, can you go back to the blue transition roadmap, the blue transition policy roadmap, please? Okay, so here what we have tried to do is to decline this process into areas, which are institutions, science, technology, innovation, private sector, labor, and trade, which were the main socioeconomic pillars for an socioeconomic model that is TRIS, I would call, related. And then what we also have tried to do is to do a first estimation of what this thinking embedded in the blue transition scenario would have meant in terms of GDP growth, in terms of, for example, future of energy consumption and so on. And our colleagues who have done this work, and it will be also published within the book that we are working on the blue transition scenario and TRIS, will be made available. So next slide, please, Kinga. So I'm a bit late. So here you can see that we made a certain estimation about the blue transition scenario 2050, and you can see that if these assumptions are put in place, you could see these developments in the next decades, which in fact the MENA region, so this is only applicable to the MENA region, but we have the data for other regions, for example, in Africa and so on, will grow at the annual growth rate of 4% up to 2050. This is again estimated. It means that based on a theoretical model that we are talking about. And then also, if we move into a green transition path, so this, the CO2 emission would grow, but at a much lower pace. And then obviously this will allow some sort of cleaning the economies while at the same time increasing a different type of trade integration, but of course, based on the data availability we have here. And also this region will become much less dependent on hydrocarbon, while at the same time, there is a push further into sources of renewable energy. So of course, this work has to continue, so then we can implement and then we can follow qualitatively the paths of green transition, digital transition, and then economic transition. So these are very important to keep qualitatively assessing these aspects. So next slide, please, Kinga. So back to my policy roadmaps, which are in fact the purpose of the discussion today. As I mentioned before, the blue transition scenario and the TRIS model application, as you could see, we have the challenges today. So for example, if we take the role of institutions, so institutions today, when we did the assessment under EMNES, and the paper is also available, what we've seen, the challenges are dysfunctional institutions, strong power asymmetries, and in some cases, failed institutions. Now, what we try to do is to give certain policy recommendations based on the process that Cynthia has explained, and also to move into what we call the comprehensive strategies of leadership with a focus on transplanting pockets of institutional efficiency, reforming the bureaucratic and corrupt units, for example, okay? But then, again, more research needs to be done on this area because we could do certain work, but not all the work has been done. So we are doing it still. And also shifting into a TRIS model for Horizon 2050, we need to move into more e-governance, e-government, and full transparency. And this is what we have to aim at going forward. Again, the pandemic has accelerated from H2 to Horizon 3, means the transformative move. On STI, we have done the same, and in many other areas, like for example, labor, we also have done the same. So next slide, please, Kinga. And then for all the other papers, so all the other papers give you a clear glimpse on, you know, what are the challenges, what are the policy recommendations if we want to move from an inertia type of scenario to what I call a transformative scenario, which again, I repeat, it has been accelerated. So it means that if the institutions within the Horizon 2, so it says, you know, the transition is not done quickly, then there might be some problems, and then we might not go into what we call our blue transition going forward. So now I would like to stop it here from my side, and then I would like to give the floor now to the stakeholders that we have invited. I would like to start the discussion with the first panelist, and I see that I will respect the lineup on the agenda. So could you please, Kinga, put the agenda back so I can follow that? I would like to start with Mohammed from the Union for the Mediterranean. Mohammed, you have 10 minutes to react on what we have talked about, please. Please.
Thank you very much, Reem. Good morning, everyone. I'll do my best to stick to my time mark and be brief as much as possible. Actually, to make this possible, I'm not using any slides. I'll just deliver my intervention directly. And I want to start by thanking the team from EMNES and EMEA for this fantastic work. As I mentioned before, and as our Secretary General, His Excellency Nasser Kamel, had mentioned earlier today, we very much value the work done by EMNES and EMEA, and we put a lot of weight to this very essential and important link between the policy dimension and the academic research dimension. What you're doing and what you have been doing is exactly what we need to link these two dimensions in an evidence-based and a scientific backed manner. So thank you for that. I'm also very happy to be sharing this panel and these sessions with very distinguished speakers. Some of them are our partners that are tried and trusted, and I'm not mentioning only here EMEA or EMNES, but also EMED, OECD, and I don't want to forget anyone. So our idea, especially now that desperate times call, I will not call them desperate measures, but for a more consolidated and reinforced partnership with our strategic partners and stakeholders. As such, I would like to take you back to the basics. Now that we're talking about the blue transition scenario and region integration, His Excellency Nasser Kamel had already mentioned how fragmented the UfM region really is. It's one of the least economically integrated regions in the world. And I don't need to share statistics with you. I'm sure you have all the statistics. The socioeconomic inequalities and injustices in the region have unfortunately been further deepened and aggravated by the current pandemic. If anything, history has taught us that behind every global crisis of this scale and scope, there lurks an opportunity. It could be once in a lifetime opportunity that we could capture if we are all well positioned and we have the vision and the tools to make use of that. Something has been mentioned earlier today about potential proximization and reshoring and the relocation of some value chains. And in the same spirit, we see also a potential in certain sectors. And I'm not talking only about this for trade purposes, but also about social economy. I'm talking about blue economy, digital economy, creative economy, to the end of the list. Please let me tell you what we have been doing at the UfM Secretariat towards contributing to a closer regional integration, which remains to be the overarching mission of the UfM Secretariat, to promote regional cooperation and integration in the UfM region towards creating an area of peace, stability, prosperity, security, and well-being for the citizens. As you know, we work on 6 areas of priority that come under 2 pillars that are intertwined, interlinked: the human development pillar and the sustainable development pillar. This division is really artificial, but we have been mandated to work on these 6 areas of priority, and our working methodology connects what we call the 3 Ps of our modus operandi. So we try to connect the policy dimension, the platform dimension, and the projects dimension. And the 4th overarching P would be the people that are at the heart of our work, specifically women and young people. Now, how do we do that? How do we make sure that these efforts and endeavors would contribute to a closer regional integration in the region? Well, it's precisely through this working methodology. And I'll give you some examples. In addition to many of the UfM labeled projects with regional outreach that are open for all the member states on a variable geometry basis, there are also other tools and other endeavors for the UfM that ensures that the regional dimension is always kept in mind. Before I talk about that, I'll just mention some examples on projects and initiatives with this regional outreach. And the flagship initiative in this case would be the Med for Jobs, the Mediterranean Initiative for Jobs, which started as a cross-sectoral project-based initiative and then have developed into a fully fledged pipeline of projects under which we have 13 projects that are labeled under economic development and employment, social and civil affairs with a focus on socioeconomic empowerment of women and gender equality and equity, and also high education, research, and innovation. But apart from projects with tangible and concrete results on the ground, I refrain from using the word impact because it's a very tricky and elusive word. I'd rather talk about results to make sure that there is an attributability link established in what I'm saying. In addition to these projects and initiatives, we also have permanent regional platforms, which we call the UfM regional platforms. And they are dedicated to all the fields of priority for our work at the Secretariat. I can give you some examples. We have the UfM regional platform on employment and labor. We have the UfM regional platform on research and innovation, on sustainable urban development, on trade, to the end of the very long list. These are platforms that meet regularly and not on an ad hoc basis. They prepare for the ministerial conferences of the UfM, and they also take stock of the mandates given to us by and through the ministerial declarations. And they bring together not only UfM government officials, but also representatives of regional and international organizations, key experts and researchers, as well as stakeholders from the private sector, the public sector, and social economy, por supuesto, as they say in Spanish. So I do not want to abuse my time slot. I just end by saying that much has been done, and since day one of the pandemic, we have been further tailoring our work program to make sure that all our efforts would not only contribute to regional integration, but also towards a post-pandemic recovery. We put a lot of value on the work done by EMNES and EMEA. Again, we praise these studies and reports, and you have our full support on this. We're keeping keen follow-up on what you have shared with us, and we look forward to a further follow-up on the outcomes of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. But what matters for us is also the applicability of the work we are trying to do It means that not only developing models and the theoretical frameworks, but also the applicability of those. And I understand that if, for example, you look at how we applied the TRIS, the economic development model, into the Lebanon case, we could see, of course, it has to be adopted also by the institutions in charge. But then the applicability could be very, I would say, specific to specific sectors and also specific themes. So that's what I wanted to discuss with you. So how do you see the applicability of the TRIS model, as I explained it this morning, into the work you are doing?
Well, as you know, our work methodology again follows a multi-stakeholder approach. And I believe that the normal course of action would be to share the findings and the ideas about this model with our stakeholders, and together decide on how to best reap the benefits and unleash the full potential of this model, which I personally find to be not only rational, but also very applicable, because it ticks all, I will not say the right boxes, but it's fully coherent with all the regional and international frameworks. And as such, it's a model that presents itself as an applicable and pragmatic tool. So I think based on this role as a regional platform that brings together stakeholders to build sectoral agendas, we can then see how to best put it into practice.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. That's what I wanted to hear. Now I would like to move to Ingrid. Ingrid from the European Commission. Ingrid, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Is it, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, okay, excellent, because I have a bit of troubles with Zoom. So very happy to be here. I'm from the European Commission, from DG NEAR B2, in charge of regional cooperation with the Southern Neighborhood. And I really, because it's a very busy period, but I'm very happy to be able to be here and join the debate, and also building on a lot of previous discussions we had with EMNES, because as Rim pointed out, this whole research was supported by the European Commission. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I want to, as suggested by EMNES, first comment a bit on the blue transition vision and the model, and then explain what the Commission is doing in this field currently, with a bit of a future outlook and the applicability of the model. So let me start with the blue transition vision and the roadmap. Rim, when you presented the different scenarios, I agree with you that the blue scenario, it's perhaps closest to reality. I mean, although on some areas, sometimes I think we are also, for some countries, in the red scenario with conflicts, but overall, this very close vision for a Euro-Mediterranean integration and UFM integration in the past, my personal view is it has lost a bit of traction in the past decade due to different reasons, be it that both in the EU and in the southern partners, there were other issues on the agenda, Arab Spring conflicts on our side, Brexit and so on, which really distracted from building this ever closer integration. Some things have happened, so progress has been achieved. I'm thinking in the area of trade, for example, there is a network of trade agreements. They are being implemented, tariffs have been produced, but beyond that, there is no further momentum for the moment, be it in the field of services or other. For the moment, it doesn't go much deeper. There are also some exceptions, I think, where we see in the region that there are real integration efforts, for example, in the field of energy and electricity markets, mainly for different production structures and very complementary structures. So there's a real interest in some areas also to integrate. I think we also have to acknowledge that the blue scenario moving towards a cooperation on topics of common interest is the most realistic one, but it's not. There are also areas where we are partly in the red, and there are areas where we are partly in the green scenario. I think we need to acknowledge that. The definitions in your roadmap of the common issues, I think they make a lot of sense. We have talked about the environmental dimension, climate change, the growing inequality, as Nasser said in the introduction, which is being exacerbated by the COVID crisis. All these are issues which call for really a different and integrated and an inclusive economic model. So I think on this, we find a lot of alignment. It corresponds also, and now let me move to my second part, what we are working on at regional level. So a lot of that echoes with us in EMEA B2. And let me say a word on how we work on regional level and how that integrates more closely. So on the one hand, there is a policy dimension at regional level, and it was already mentioned by Mohammed before. We work also as the co-presidency of the UfM, so there is a policy sector dialogue on the different UfM platforms where European and Mediterranean and UfM membership policymakers meet to agree on common priorities, and also through ministerial declarations to agree on them and to implement them in country. And I think that last aspect needs to be strengthened and reinforced. We accompany that then with a number of regional initiatives and programs, and many of them take the principles presented in your roadmap already at heart. To give you examples, we use the regional program also to pilot new approaches. So we have used them, for example, to experiment with new economic models, such as social entrepreneurship. The two initiatives MEDUP, which is running for 3 years already in the region, and SAFIR, where this is really being experimented with policymakers, with institutions, but also with social enterprises. Other big topics are working on innovation, startups, clusters, to connect both sides, actors from both sides of the Mediterranean shore. Circular economy, the well-known SwitchMed program, which focuses on sustainable production and consumption. So also topics you have reflected in the model. And I want to mention two more to illustrate, because I want to build on that later on. The EU Initiative for Financial Inclusion. This is working with financial institutions, different banks, on new instruments such as blending and guarantees, really to provide access to finance for SMEs, but from our side, again, with this inclusiveness focus. So to focus on the missing middle, and to focus especially also on microfinance of small enterprises, providing access, with a territorial distribution, not only companies which are located in the capitals, and having also a certain percentage of these financial instruments reserved for women entrepreneurs. So trying to bring this inclusiveness, into practice. These were some practical examples. Let me give you a bit of an outlook also on the future of where we stand at the EU at the moment, because it's quite a strategic year. You're aware there are new Commission priorities with the Commission which took office at the end of last year. And there are three main topics at the core of the agenda: the Green Deal, involving CO2 neutrality for the EU by the year 2050, but also concepts such as circular economy, green technologies. All this is really one of the biggest priorities. It has perhaps lost a little bit of visibility in the context of COVID, but it's fully there, and it is one of our main strategic objectives. The other one will also resound with you: fit for the digital age. So again, something which has been strengthened, or the need for it has come out more clearly in the pandemic. And the third, and I think that also links with the model, an economy that works for people, which is going beyond the economic growth model, but really having at its core the objective that the benefits from the economy, they should reach people. So it is this very human-centered approach. So this is a clear strategic framework. At the same time, we are preparing the financial cycle for the next 7 years, so-called multi-financial framework. And there you will have one element, you may have heard about it also within the EU, but also in the external dimension, the Economic Recovery Fund. So there will be much more use of financial instruments, blending, bringing in sources from the private sector than in the past, because public funds are everywhere limited. So to have this leverage, working with the banks, with financial institutions. And I think there for us, the big challenge is to ensure the policy first principle, so that these are just tools, but they're there to implement the three strategic objectives I have mentioned before. And that's I think one of the big topics of the future. In general, we try a Team Europe approach, really, and this came out as one of the results of the pandemic. To the only way to combat or to have an impact is to combine resources. European Commission, the member states, the financial institutions, but with this policy first principle. So with that background, we are also starting the programming for the next 7 years, meaning establishing priorities with our partner countries and at regional level, and it will translate all what I have said then into concrete cooperation. And as already mentioned several times beforehand, it's also the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona Declaration. So I think it's really a year where many aspects and strategic aspects are coming together, and where it's the right moment to look into the future, to present this vision and to have this vision. So in summary, I think, yes, we need to use all the different forms of regional cooperation in topics where there is an interest from both sides. Political will is key, and I think that's the challenge. I mean, EMNES and the research networks, I think you have done a great job to elaborate the model and to show the benefits. The challenge is to get the buy-in from policymakers. We try to integrate some of the key principles. Perhaps three ideas also. Against the background of what I said, one topic to think about and to reflect is also this whole field of sustainable finance, because this is an area which will grow in proportion. We also have some new dynamics, for example, the EU-Africa relations, this continent-to-continent relations. So there are also other dynamics, you know, going to that, influencing also the region. And integrating also the lessons from COVID-19, so to integrate also this notion of resilient societies. And I think a lot of the elements you put on the table, on the social inclusion, you know, the pandemic has shown very clearly which groups of society are left out in Europe, in partner countries. I think it's, again, a common problem we have. So in summary, we want to use the regional programs to pilot these new approaches and then to really pick up some of the ideas of your research. Let me finish here, and thank you very much for this occasion.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, for this very comprehensive remarks. And I think I completely agree with you about the new ideas that you suggested us and suggested in general. Sustainable finance, its core. And for the moment, we are working on it, not for the region, but of course, we need to advance the research agenda there. But just for information, we have a conference which we are organizing in London specifically on sustainable finance globally. And there is a very great interest from the region also to work on those topics. So this is very good news. In fact, EU-Africa, yes, I absolutely agree. At EMEA, we have developed research on trying to assess the policy response of the COVID, but then trying also to develop some indexes there. And we integrated Africa, because for us now, Mediterranean and Africa, and this is also the you know, based on the comments I made at the beginning, Africa, it's part of the construction now, because it's very much linked, in fact, to the Mediterranean via North Africa. And even the North African countries are exhibiting large interest into the African continent, and it is the same continent. So that's very important. And I am very happy also to see that EU has made this EU-Africa as one of the cornerstone of the partnership going forward. Yes, I absolutely agree about the COVID-19 and resilience, and this is what the third point I added when I presented the TRIS model. We assessed that the TRIS model is also allowing us to develop a more resilient future, and also it could respond to the recovery from external shocks like the pandemic we have been we are still going through. Now, the next panelist, my friend Carlos Conde. Carlos has been with us now for several webinars, and I'm very happy to have you as one of the key partners of EMEA and EMNES. Carlos is also a member of the advisory committee of EMNES, so we try really to align as much as possible our works, I mean, from our side, so then we can support you know, the work that is being done by the OECD. So Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rim, for these very kind words. It's really a pleasure to be with you, with all colleagues and friends in these very insightful discussions, very important also for us to learn what you are doing. I will make a PowerPoint presentation, if you allow me. So I will put it in the screen if I can. I think something is what I am doing. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, very well.
Ah, okay, very good. So then I go. Here we go, sorry. Okay, very good. So thank you for this invitation. You asked us to react and provide feedback to your scenario for the blue transition, and then describing a bit our activity. So I will start to congratulate you for this very important work, very useful for all of us. And indeed, this is very much aligned with OECD work, and I would say the OECD vision for our own countries, but also for the partner economies, and is very consistent with different lines and streams of work that the OECD has been implemented in the last years. The vision, for example, on the inclusive growth is shared, and the importance of distribute fairly across society and putting the needs of the sustainable and responsible development with an important focus on inclusion. I think in the case of the Mediterranean, for all of us, this is all a factor that will also be reinforced by the impact of COVID that has put very much in front of our eyes the high cost of insufficient welfare provision and the very dramatic impact of social inequality. We are working, and you make use also of our work in some macro trends related to globalization, the big trends on trade and GIZ that I will deepen a bit later on, digital transformation, something that we are also bringing to the region, and climate change. So indeed, I think I see a very good coherence between your work and what we are promoting, and of course we are pleased to collaborate with you on that. Your focus on governance is indeed very adequate, and this has been one of the big priorities of the OECD in our collaboration with the Mediterranean countries, looking for integral societies, transparency, inclusive decision processes, that still there is a big room for improvement of that. If I may underline a little bit of difference in our respective approaches, I must say that the OECD, in our main strategies, we really put gender equality at the center of most of our policies. We think this is not only a factor of justice, but it's also a very important factor of competitiveness and economic development and social development. So in our own countries, but also in our collaboration with other regions of the world, including our work in MENA, we really put gender equality and women empowerment at the center. And I encourage maybe to reinforce a bit this aspect in your strategy when we are talking about issues such as human capital or improving the skills of the region. This is totally connected. I mean, we cannot simply think that the necessary skills of the region will be upgraded without a massive contribution of women to public and private life. So we are aligned on this. Now, the question that also has been mentioned by some of the colleagues is about how to make it happen and how to provide the necessary tools for the implementation of these principles and having a effective and real transition. I would say this is a bit our core business. It's not only about setting the principles of the recommendations, but also providing policy advice and supporting governments in providing the tools for implementation. The political economy of reform is, in that sense, absolutely essential to facilitate that this transition takes place. On that, we share the central role of data analysis, and on that we salute the very important role of EMEA as really a federation of efforts to put more intelligence, more data, and more analysis on the different policy areas. This is essential. But then we need to reflect very much about the institutional setting we want for an integrated and more advanced Mediterranean region. And on that, the role of multilateral relations and the role of this effort, like the one you are doing of federating the efforts from different stakeholders that come from different experiences, is essential. In your report, for example, you very rightly pointed out some institutional deficits. For example, this focus in the relations between the European Union and the Mediterranean countries on the bilateral agreements that have to some extent impeded more, I would say, regional integration from different perspectives. So we think these institutional factors are very important. On that, our contribution focuses very much in something that is key for the OECD, quite pragmatic, in the way that we encourage, in particular, the MENA countries to incorporate more the international standards, the international good practices that can really facilitate this policy implementation and giving very pragmatic orientations to the necessary reforms. And this covered the entire spectrum of policy domains from environment to education, employment, EMEA, FDI, entrepreneurship, etc. So we are very pleased that in our MENA initiative that is very much focused on this partage, on this sharing the practices, discussing common standards, and several countries are working with us on that. We are all very influenced by the evolution of the European integration and these notions of policy convergence, of even policy harmonization. We think they are theoretical concepts, but at the same time, there is an application that we can try to put together in order to provide the policymakers also for the effective tools for a change that can promote the transition we are aiming at. You asked it to make some specific references to trade. Again, we are very grateful to the colleagues from the Union for the Mediterranean that have already mentioned the report we are doing together that will have an important component on trade. On that, of course, we can think in an ideal scenario of integration, but also we have a more pragmatic approach maybe of measuring what is the tendency and where we stand. Usually we start with very negative figures, it's the less integrated region in the world. But we can see, for example, that intra-regional trade has improved during the last years, and there is a positive tendency on that. So this is probably not sufficient, but this is good. And then we need to look into the factors that allowed for that and reinforcing the policy tools that can even reinforce it further. And on that, we can see that, for example, according to our trade facilitation index, the region is improving. So this is something concrete that we can measure, that we can look at what are the policy dimensions, what are the reforms that the countries are implementing to that, and reinforcing concrete decisions on that side. Restrictions to FDI, again, they are decreasing, and we are working very much, and I'm very glad to share the panel with Ingrid from the European Union. We are working very hard together to provide the conditions for investment to flow better. Of course, the debate of the day is about the GIZs and the better positioning of the region in the global value chain, which is one of the important dimensions of integration of the global economy. There we know that the situation is still an integration that is uncomparable to other parts of the world and similar countries with similar level of development. In your report, you mentioned some of the factors that are critical to improve the positioning of the region, such as skills, infrastructure, etc. In our reports with the Union for the Mediterranean, we will work very much on that. I would like simply to say that the current debate maybe is important to clarify two different dimensions. There is a contingent one, which is very much related to COVID, and the deficiencies that we have suffered because of the impact on the supply chains. But there is a more structural, long-standing discussion about the evolution of these offshoring mechanisms and the systems of industrial production. And on that, it's true that there is some trends that show that there is a reorganization of the value chains that can better position the Mediterranean region because of its proximity to especially the European market. So it's a tendency that is there, but again, will require to really have an effective impact the good policy answers and the good policy solutions to really take advantage of this opportunity. So I will go to my last the last part of my presentation very shortly about what we are doing and how we can better complement and how we are working also in this scenario. I have already mentioned our upcoming reports with the Union for the Mediterranean and supported by GIZ, one on regional integration and the other on the impact of COVID. I will also mention briefly our MENA competitiveness program and then our program with the European Union on promoting investment in the Mediterranean. Well, on the integration, I would say that our approach, again, is very practical and is very based on policy making, in the sense that we are defining what are the scenarios of integration that are possible with the current circumstances and that are desirable in consultation with the countries and with the policy makers, with the idea of setting a system of indicators that can help to measure what is the progress against the objectives that have been agreed. And this can be very well complemented with the approaches that of your scenario, for example, that have the also the ambition of influencing the thinking of the policymakers and evolving also the political vision of about the integration. And we are also working on that, but at this stage we think it's also useful really to set up objectives that are feasible and can be measured. We will quantify the cost of non-integration in the case of trade. We think that methodologically only this is possible at this stage, and we will provide recommendations. So I'm sure we will also partner with you to disseminate the results when they are ready. We have already started a new report on the impact of COVID with the Union for the Mediterranean in the different policy areas, again, to measure what is the specific impact, and with a special focus, as I was mentioning, on the analysis of the orientation of industrial production and what are the possibilities for this proximization of the supply chains very much impacted by COVID. I was mentioning also our overarching institutional platform to work with the region, the EMENA governance and competitiveness program. Here I am focusing on the competitiveness part. We are launching a new phase of this program for the next 5 years, 21-25, and we will focus in two main but interconnected, I would say, major strategic policy issues. One is really increasing the competitiveness of the region, and with a very important focus on private sector development, working on the business environment, on promoting entrepreneurship. We really think that the region needs a stronger private sector to reach its development objectives. On that, technology and digital economy will be very important, and of course, connectivity and better trade opportunities. This needs to be put together with a very inclusive orientation in our vision, focusing on economic empowerment, especially for certain categories of the population. I mentioned the importance of women and youth. A lot of interest and demand to work more on informality, better understand its dimensions, and how to transform also the economic structure in a way that will provide more secure conditions to the people. And this is all. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm glad to continue the dialogue and responding to your questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carlos, for this very comprehensive presentation. I just wanted to make one point on the gender equality and women empowerment. It is one of the principles of our work. So normally in our research, we try to get all the data about gender. And obviously, we even within our network, EMNES, 50% is women, so we have gender equality pretty much. So if you look at what we practically, we are implementing these principle on the start of our work. So so yes, probably we need to show it a bit more in terms of the communication. But yes, gender equality and women empowerment is one of the key, I would say, principles on our projects when we implement them on our research, and but then most probably we need to do more communication on that. So yes, on the regional integration, thank you very much for your views and your work on these areas. But let me just say that, as I said, when was mentioned by His Excellency Nasser Kamel, integration has, it's a very, very important in the region, but what is also important, and you mentioned it, it's what I call the governance integration. So we need to talk always about a certain level of, you call convergence, I call harmonization. I mean, we need to go into the highest level of harmonization in that aspect. And this is part of the T, the transparency, you know, transparency in governance in general, which has a lot behind it. So I think it is extremely important to take it as one of the key pillars in integration. And I understand your point of view, but for example, in the report that we have done also over the last year, we have discussed it with the teams. Regional integration without governance, like institutional integration, might have difficulties to advance. Of course, this is I would say a hypothesis. We are doing research on this, but certainly I believe that that could be an impediment for economic research, for economic integration, sorry. Okay, I would like to move into the next panelist, Eckhard Ernest from International Labour Organization, to give his views on this blue transition scenario and TRIS, and to talk about the digital transition and future of work. Eckhard.
Thank you very much, thank you very much for EMNES and EMEA for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with you here and to share some of our views here. I'll give you, just let me share the screen here. All right. Thanks again for the invitation. I wanted to concentrate my 10 minutes of remarks on a specific issue that has been very much at the forefront of our own work at the International Labour Organization, which is related to youth employment, which is a huge challenge, obviously, as you all know, in the region. And I would want to echo also Carlo's points about the behind the youth challenge in the region. There is obviously also a gender dimension behind, which is specifically severe here, and needs to focus of policymakers. And I wanted to talk a bit both in terms of the current challenges that come out of the pandemic and how the digital transition made us somehow kind of made these things more severe, but also can maybe offer some options for policy answers, and obviously kind of seeing to what extent ILO and EMNES can work together on some of these aspects in order to strengthen the inclusive part of the TRIPS approach. So let me start by just kind of giving a quick overview. I mean, you're all aware of these things, but I think it's worthwhile to kind of pinpoint this out again. So that obviously we are challenging times for young people. That was always true, already true before the COVID crisis, but now with COVID-19 and the destruction of millions of jobs, young people are particularly badly hit. I mean, they're obviously always the worst ones to let go in crisis and recession times, and this time is no different. If for those of you who have followed our ILO monitors recently, you've seen the enormous amount of working hours that have been shed, and how this particularly has affected young people. What is different this time, and I think this is an important aspect for what I'm going to say in the next few minutes, is this lockdown, the situation of the COVID crisis has not only destroyed jobs, it has also prevented young people from continuing to going to school or to return to school. And the previous crisis in 2008, 2009, what we saw is that a lot of young people decided, rather than entering the labor market, to continue school. Now, this was not an option now, and it's still not an option in many countries because schools are still locked down. My own kids still have to go to school from home. They're lucky enough that have the infrastructure to do so. but in many countries, and especially in the region, don't have that. So that's actually an impediment for these young people to prepare for the wave of automation and the digital transformation that is currently coming. One particular aspect, and I come to this a bit also, which is a particular challenge for the region, is that the millennials is a generation that has been particularly hard hit. So millennials are already no longer considered to be young. They're in their late 20s, early 30s now. But they are hard hit in the sense that they have faced the second crisis in less than 15 years. And so these kind of double crises, this double warming that these people are facing is obviously something that will have long-term implications for years to come in terms of lower earnings, in terms of lower labor market attachment, etc. And so a surprise then that the precariousness and informality in this region is also on the rise again, not only for young people, but they are especially so. And again, the consequences for long-term careers and earnings are particularly severe there. Let's have a look at it, maybe a bit breakdown. And I think one category that always comes out in our own analysis and our own policy focus in the discussion about youth is this particular category of not in employment or in education or training called NEET. So here you see this is for the global, for the world as a whole. You see 509 people, according to our estimates, are in this category. That's roughly 50%, 45 to 50% of all young people in the world, 15 to 24. And so these people are basically neither educated nor employment, nor in employment. So they're somehow kind of not at all available for long-term long-term attachment to the labor market. If you look at this in North Africa and the Arab states, so you see this is a bit, it's a lot of things going on here, a lot of countries, but regions is, first of all, you see for all countries and for all regions, what we have is the large difference between a youth need rate for men and the youth need rate for women. So the blue bars are the ones for men, for women, and the red bars are the ones for men. And you see that there is a huge gender gap as well. And it's particularly severe if you look at here for Arab states, it's particularly severe here. Maybe not as bad as Southern Asia, but certainly one of the outliers here. It's not as bad in North Africa. What you do see, however, is that the youth need rate for men has actually increased. For women, it came down a bit since over the last 15 years. So that, I guess I have to say that is actually pre-COVID-19. So we are not talking about COVID-19 effect, which certainly is changing that picture quite dramatically. But clearly there is an important impediment, and both regions stand out as one of those few regions in the world that have particularly high need rates for women. Now, interestingly, is that education for Arab youth is actually average, let's say, in comparison to the world average, is certainly higher than in some other developing regions of the world. Clearly, there are large within region differences. What is most important, again, is the large gender gap that you see here. So here we don't distinguish between North Africa and Middle East, and you see that for these. For this region, you see, for the Arab states, you see that the male rate is actually relatively high, it's the second highest in all world regions, but the female rate again is relatively low, which means that actually these young women are relatively badly prepared for the common automation and technological transition that we're going to face right now. One aspect, and I think that's really again specific to the region here, is the fact that you actually see that the need rate for higher educated people, for those with tertiary education, university, etc., this is the yellow bar here, is the highest in the world, and that has something to do, especially here. Yeah, I mean, this is again this Arab states and North Africa lumped together, and so you see that the need rates. In principle, you would expect people with university degrees having relatively strong attachment to the labor market and being actually in employment, not necessarily being unemployed. But you see that that's not true for Arab states and North Africa, which is an indication that there's a huge skills mismatch, between the education that you get delivered on the in public institutions or in many countries private institutions, and the needs on the labor market. Partly that has to do with the fact that a lot of subjects that are being taught are unrelated to natural science and mostly social science or languages, etc. And certainly related to the incentives that are being put forward by large public sector employment in some of these countries. But clearly, overall, the issue is really that the public education system does not deliver the necessary resources, the necessary competences and skills for these young people to be actually have an attachment on the labor market. Secondary education is the same, and obviously when you have no education, the need rate is particularly high. And again, here is the second highest in the world after Eastern Europe and Central Asia. But that's not necessarily a relevant comparison here. What's really important is the fact that Arab states in North Africa do not get the bang for the buck for their spending on education that they would expect from their systems. And so no surprise then that young people are the ones who are facing the highest risk of being threatened by automation. Now here we don't have a distinction between different geographical regions, but only by income levels. But you see that no matter whether you look at the OECD countries or a selected number of low and middle income countries, the younger categories of workers up to 25, even 30 years are the ones that are the ones that facing higher rates of automation, and only when you get to the older category of workers, 60 to 65, you get again a rising risk of losing your job because of the automation coming. Now, what are the policy implications from this? And I mean, I hope that on this basis, I mean, we can maybe also find some common ground with EMNES in terms of looking into these things more closely. I think the first one is clearly that the digitalization of new technologies should be used to improve education and the educational delivery. It's not only about getting the right education, it's also kind of identifying what is the right education. Now we know that there's a lot of innovation going on in terms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, etc., to identify what are the right skills and competencies and how can these skills and competencies being implemented. And here I would say that the digitalization that is actually relatively advanced in some parts of the region should be put to use in order to help identify the right gaps and the right competencies and skills that need to be delivered to these young people. So it shouldn't be kind of transplanting simple broad ideas about putting forward university education in the region, but rather seeing to what extent we need more closely related closely to the labor market related skills through vocational training system, etc., that should be put forward. And I think that new technologies and digitalization can help. And it would be interesting to see to what extent we can maybe even launch some joint work on this to identify what kind of concrete tools can be implemented in the region. The other thing, and it's in a sense, it's related to its enhanced public employment services. The interesting thing about the region is that it actually does have administrative capacity. It's not that there are no institutions available, but the public employment services are extremely underfunded and underserved the economy, which is also one of the reasons why you see this large informal economy. So again, digitalization can help in combination with a closely knit interaction with the employment services, with the educational landscape, can actually help to provide the right skills, the right identification of job openings for young people. And then again, a point that is related to the previous tools is that we need to investigate more the modernization of administration and social security systems to reduce informality. Again, the informality in the region is endemic. And it's not because there is no social security system. Actually, these systems do exist. They are just not providing the services at the level at which they could do, simply because they don't have the administrative capacity to identify all the people that would need to be covered by the system. And these new technologies, new digital tools could help. And I think, again, this would be actually an extremely interesting point also for some of my colleagues to identify with URIM and with EMNES, to see what we can do in terms of concrete collaboration and concrete research, how these new technologies and digital tools can be used to help address this, this challenge. I stop it here and I'm looking forward to further discussion with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ekahard. This is very enlightening, and we certainly will continue our research agenda on these matters together, because you joined recently EMNES Advisory Committee and EMEA Advisory Board. So hopefully we will continue work on the future of work, how to improve the situation for the youth, and then trying also to understand the opportunities and challenges of the digital transition, because this one of the main issues that we have identified in our research already is that, okay, you have opportunities if you embed this digital transition quickly into your economic models, but then you also have threats, because if you are not prepared, then massive losses of job, and this process has been accelerated by the pandemic, and we've seen it. Now, countries who had deep pockets and safety nets, they are kind of delaying these losses of jobs, but then until when? And when is going to be the breakup point? Nobody knows, and this is why the whole debate, it's about uncertainty and how to maximize, or how to regain, I would say not to regain, but gain resilience. So I want to go straight to the Pantelis Kapros, who is a professor at University of UfM, and then he is also a member of the executive board of EMEA. We have worked together since many years, since the Metro era. We have devised together the impact assessment on the blue transition scenario, the red scenario, and so on. I'm very happy to have Pantelis with us today to talk about his views and, if possible, on the green transition. Pantelis, the floor is yours.
Thank you for this invitation. Happy to see also Carlo on the screen. Very happy to be with you today. I will share the screen right now. It should be this one. Okay. Yes, I hope you are seeing my slides.
Yes, very, very well.
Okay, I will concentrate and discuss very briefly the issues about the transition, restructuring of the energy systems in the southern Mediterranean countries towards the drastic reduction of carbon dioxide emissions, and in this way, contribution to mitigation of climate change. It is about here it is about a project that we have assessed through our models, the nationally determined contribution plans submitted so far by the southern Mediterranean countries, and I think we get very interesting suggestions which go together, are very consistent with the new approach. The progress with the NDCs at the regional level, I would say, is not fully satisfactory, except for Morocco, very high ambition and best practice, promising emergence of actions in Jordan, Tunisia, and Israel for different reasons. Jordan active in renewable energy, Israel innovative policy instruments, Tunisia has a well-prepared action plan but slow implementation. Egypt and Algeria, having large energy resources, are lagging behind all the others due to lack of ambitious targets and instruments. It is a matter of hesitation in reality to join the ambitious action towards mitigation of climate change. And Palestine and Lebanon still face obstacles regarding funding and facilitation internationally. The game-changing situation everywhere, not only in the MENA, is the technology evolution with the renewables. and the renewables are getting so cheap nowadays, and given the extremely high potential of the region, that we see prospects of very high investment, and it has been shown already in the region and can be booming further in the future. So that is the game-changing evolution are the renewables. There are very high potentials of reducing emissions in transport and industry, and energy efficiency in general, but the actions so far have been very insufficient. The three main obstacles which go together with your approach is, in fact, the high-level support of policy, the unsteady political and economic conditions, and the issues of financing and the international facilitation of this financing. We have performed very detailed modeling of energy supply, demand, and the economy, one by one of the countries of the regions, North Africa and Middle East, as well as, of course, of the European countries. The MENA model, it is called MENA-EDS, and in this context, we have developed and quantified four main scenarios. The baseline, which is a sort of business as usual, low unconditional NDC scenario, conditional NDC, which has also financial support and technology transfer, and a more ambitious low emission scenarios towards climate neutrality, which is in line with the aim of 1.5 degrees for the global temperature. So very briefly, the evolution of CO2 emissions total in the MENA countries looks like this in the various scenarios. The current trend is very negative for climate change. It is this black line. The other extreme, which is the mostly desirable evolution, compatible with the 1.5 degrees Celsius, is the blue line. And the realistic, so to say, currently announced plans correspond in the best case to this yellow line. If the preconditions like financing, institutional reforms, etc., do not fulfill, then it is probable to see this red line, the unconditional NDCs to happen, which of course, again, are negatively related to the climate objectives. And this green light is compatible with the objective of the 2 degrees on a global case. So this illustrates that there is a gap. By country, we can see that Morocco and Tunisia promise actions that are very significant in terms of emissions reduction. And then Algeria and Egypt could have done more. And then the smaller countries have elaborated plans, but not fully prepared with actions to implement them. So let me discuss a bit our conclusions and recommendations. A very general first conclusion is that the low carbon energy system economy is now feasible, and the most important is now affordable. We do not have anymore the situation that reducing emissions drastically is more costly than today's system. This is a very big change thanks to low costs of abundant renewables that are available now in the region. So we are talking here about a tremendous opportunity for getting at the same time low carbon, modern services, and lower costs of energy than today. but this is obstructed by many, many barriers that have to be overcome to provide the possibility of tapping on this new opportunity. There is a second opportunity, the tremendous technology progress of energy efficiency in appliances, any kind of appliance and equipment, both in buildings, lighting, industry, etc. We have an emerging trend, which is the promising success of electromobility. It is on track, but not yet delivered. And finally, a more longer-term trend, the emerging climate neutral fuels, in fact, hydrogen and synthetic hydrocarbons, which in a prospect in 20 years' time, probably, or even less, will be a fantastic opportunity for the SMENA region. Because of the abundant renewables, they will be able to produce at a massive scale synthetic hydrocarbons, climate neutral without greenhouse gas effects, and maintain in this way an export potential from the MENA region. So it is much less today to think about exporting electricity from cables. The new opportunities is exporting liquids and compressed or liquefied gaseous fuels produced from electricity, from renewable electricity, domestically in the MENA industry. So there are three dimensions here of transformation: electrification, renewables, and highly efficient appliances, equipment, and vehicles. So a key to enable this transition is, of course, financing and facilitation of investment. There are opportunities under the international agreements like Article 6, which the exploitation of which is not well established yet. In general, the transition is heavily capital intensive, so financing is key, but has also preconditions which are not yet met: institutional, regulatory uncertainty, political stability, prospect of getting skilled labor, infrastructure, and transparent services, level playing field. All these kind of things are very important preconditions to see this capital-intensive investment to be realized. And they are not only regarding individual investment, but it is also about investment in grids, in decentralized renewable applications, in smart systems, in electromobility, and of course in the hydrogen new business. The transition reduces very drastically operating and fuel costs. And because of the new architecture of grids and smart systems allowed for by renewables and the modern storage systems, it is possible at lower levelized cost to get modern energy services. So my final point is about the barriers to address to make this transition happen. Elimination of fossil fuel subsidies, level playing field. Attraction of new investment, grids, renewables, transport. Make sure that consumer prices and costs are under control during the transition, despite the new investment. A special focus on energy and technology poverty that, as I explained already, there are ways now, thanks to the technology evolution, to address it in an effective way and make sure public acceptance and participation in this process. So through this, I stop here. I think that this new perspective of the energy strategy is much more modern than the work that we have done a few years ago in our common projects. and much more updated, fits very well with your vision in the blue strategy. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much, Pantelis. You just illuminated me personally, because I could not expect better strategy and transition than this. Thank you very much. I think this is also in line with the debate that we have been making separately. You mentioned the financing part, and also the sustainable finance, which now what is at least many players are trying to do is to impose certain sustainable criteria on the financial institutions to move into this type of strategies that you are proposing. And I think it fits perfectly well into what is our vision, the common vision of the blue transition scenario for the Mediterranean and for Africa. Now, I would like to give the floor to Carlo to react on these presentations, and then I move to the next panelist. Carlo, the floor is yours.
What I can say is there is a lot of stimulating feedback. So thanks to all. Just this last one from Car-Processing, I took the picture of the recommendation for the energy transition in the MENA region, in the Mediterranean. I think there is very interesting to think how these can be sold to the present policy makers, because there are a lot of potentially lock-ins about, for example, the issue of eliminating the fuel subsidies. Related to this, there is a lot of social change that is going to go with this, and how to manage this transition concretely for renovating the policy making gradually is really the big problem. I don't enter into the details of many other observations that have been done because we don't have the time. I took some notes, so if you will do also minutes, I can integrate the minutes of this meeting. I want just to say one thing about the first intervention that partially is related to how to make this happen in the social and policy reality. The intervention from Mohamed from the Union for the Mediterranean, and I found very interesting the fact that you have this 4P, policy, platform, project, and people way of intervening. I think one reflection to be done should be how to transform, how to support the platforms that the Union for the Mediterranean is using already for supporting stakeholders dialogue, also in perspective to open to the citizens in the Mediterranean, because that is a very big problem, how to create a public opinion about this transition, because we are a group of foresight experts, intellectually minded people. The idea of the parachute is that we are parachuted into the reality to have to change something, but you can develop vision, you can make those very consistent thanks to the dialogue with the experts and with the stakeholders, the policymaker, but there is a problem also of connecting with the real policy and the public opinion. And I think deliberative, I would say participative processes should be connected to this platform in terms of increasing the awareness of future issues of the population, of the wider population, at the first level, increasing the consultation possibilities, so some two-way communication with the citizens, and finally, very finally, because it's a gradual progress, to include some citizens empowerment, some deliberation possibilities. This is something that in the European Union we are starting to consider. We have some research program about increasing citizens empowerment for the Green Deal, for example. I think that for receiving public participation, acceptance is not only a matter of acceptance, it's a matter of empowerment of people. So I think that's how one of the main points is how to connect this vision also to the possibility of having an impact on public opinion in the region. So this is the general comment that I would like to make.
Thank you, Carlo, for this. I have one quick question to Pantelis. Pantelis, how do you see the digital or digitalization within the strategy that you have presented? So do you see digital decentralized platforms for electrification, for example, especially in areas that are rural areas, a possibility to explore?
Yes, absolutely. In my terminology, modern energy services to everybody, this includes in reality the combination of renewables, smart grids, decentralized control and markets, which all those can be enabled under a digitalization platform. So it is essential as a technology. But I prefer the terminology modern energy services because it includes also not only electricity, but also efficient appliances and equipment and recharging of electric cars. All those are modern. And I wanted to also to explain another terminology that we are using, which is technology poverty. This goes beyond energy poverty. Technology poverty is the inability of low-income classes to buy and have access to modern energy services because of lack of possibility to acquire the corresponding equipment. It is not that they do not have energy for cooking, for example, or for heating, that they do not have the modern equipment to get it. In this way, the society could move in two diverging speeds because of the technology gap. So technology poverty is the emerging concept that we have to include properly and is of course extremely relevant in many countries.
Yeah. That's very well taken to enhance access to this modern energy service, so to make it more democratic, and I think to make in fact technology more democratic to everybody. Very well taken, and certainly it will be integrated into our blue transition outlook, so we can discuss this the next step later on. Now I would like to give the floor to the private sector, so represented by BusinessMed. And by Jihen Boutiba, who is the Secretary General of the organization. So I would like now Jihen to take the floor. Please, Jihen.
Thank you, Rim. And the expert of EMEA and EMNES for this study and the proposal of this TRIS blue transition model. So I will go straight to the point. I think we are running out of time and give our impression as a private sector on this study and give some example of our concrete action about this subject in the ground. As a Euro-Mediterranean regional employers organization representing private sector and of course social partners. So the region is not, to jump on the digital part, the region is not a digital space yet. So it's more like a digital archipelago with a number of hotspots in a sea of wide territories which are still far from reaping the benefits of the digital shift. For rebalancing, market forces will not be sufficient, as they often tend to concentrate digitalization into few areas. So this is why, as a BusinessMed organization, representing Euro-Mediterranean partners, and particularly employers organization and business platform, we are implementing a new platform which called a business country desk platform, through a project we call Enhancing Business Support Organization, a regional project with the European Commission. So it's the only platform imagined providing digital service to SMEs through main three dimensions: partnership, business help desk, and the matching tool in cooperation with International Trade Center. So these three functions will enable SMEs and investors access potential markets, trade for goods and services in an easily way, including a B2B marketplace for SMEs, investors, and organizations in a virtual version, supported by a kind of chat box, business events focused on tool with intent-based matchmaking that align with the attendee goals, easy meeting booking to keep our SMEs in the region engaged and organized, partnering opportunities by profile, business offer, business request, technology offer, technology request by country of origin and client requested. And MedSMEs friendly kind of digital tool to reduce the digital skills shortage in the region that will allow kind of e-learning modules for SMEs, exporters, investors, and the business community, promotion, training, and raising competence of SMEs in the field of digitalization, and access to market economic information of the country, of the region, with the possibility to extract updated statistic, current amendment on the investment and regulatory framework of the South neighborhood countries, which is worked in parallel with the International Trade Center, with the Euromed Trade Help Desk platform of the ITC. An intuitive directory combined with the multi-criteria search engine. So this platform will be useful as an interactive platform, and that will be also enlarged in the future for the African countries with the support of the African Union, the League of Arab States, and of course the European Commission. But all these actions cannot give any concrete value if you do not imperatively implement concrete action in the ground in order to be efficient. So passing through social policies model is mandatory. We have to develop a social business model, not in the context of shareholders' value, and it's not enough to maximize entrepreneurial value. We have to integrate all stakeholder value, like employers, Chamber of Commerce, Agency of Promotion, civil society, university, women and youth organization. We must integrate social values in all companies. And as per SDG principle, no one is left behind. So private sector will not and never enhance without any social business model, including all the stakeholders. So why not to develop a mainstreaming social business model, social objective, before starting this TRIS action in the region to break down protectionism and reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers. So efficiency is not sufficient anymore. We have to work on resilience and transparency by accelerating economic liberalism with no private unilateral initiative. That's where the role of social dialogue with all the stakeholders is important and mandatory. And governments and all donors should hear and implement in synergy with us, all the stakeholders, all laws, action, and rules in order to adapt this TRIS model for the future of the region by empowering and involving all the stakeholders. So all action of labor, education, innovation, trade, fiscal, migration, and employment, monetary and financial policy depends on a good and a worth dialogue with all parties involved in the consultation. Otherwise, all the studies will not give any real added value. So we used a kind of approach of a first regional project on social Mediterranean social dialogue, which is called the SOLID project. It's a regional initiative, and now the second phase we start with the ILO and the European Commission. Indeed, all stakeholders were involved in the whole process. When I said all the stakeholders, it means social partners, trade unions, employers' organization, local authorities, municipalities, CSOs, women and youth, and so on. And we raised our common voice in a kind of a charter declaration to the governments, and it has been adopted and signed. And I'm insisting about adopting and signing because it's not easy to have the government signing any charter by all the stakeholders and agreed on all the points. So the most important in this initiative is that we did it from ourselves, which means that we did not expect order from any external party, partners or donors, just a lot of support and encouragement without interfering deeply. We use the bottom approach of works because at the end, we are the only ones capable to know what can be done in our own culture, in the ground, within our countries, and neither any study or prepared model can anticipate how Southern Mediterranean countries will react politically and culturally if you don't have the right approach, which means no instruction, but a stakeholder social approach and social business model for a sustainable co-development of EU and Mediterranean sub-region real accomplishment. So I just give my point of view and the point of view of the private sector, resuming two actions we are working on in terms of business and in terms of social dialogue. But these actions, actually, as I said, even with all the studies and with all the help of government, all the help of the donors, we cannot do anything if you don't empower all these stakeholders. So thank you, Rim. I think I didn't take so much time.
Thank you very much, Jihan, and I appreciate very much your point about mainstreaming the social model into the private sector, going beyond the efficiency principle to resilience principle. And this is one of the pillars that you are proposing here, and you are already doing via the implementation of the social dialogue with all stakeholders. But beyond this, as you mentioned, capacity building and really pushing this idea into the private sector to move their thinking from a shareholder value to a stakeholder value, which involves the social dimension, and probably also the environmental dimension is one key element that you mentioned, and hopefully you will be able to get with the Solid initiative and maybe other initiatives that would probably integrate environmental objectives as well, could be the way forward for the private sector. Thank you very much. And we will keep, of course, collaborating, because with BusinessMed, we are collaborating on what we call the green entrepreneurs. And this is a project which with other partners, we will try to embed those values of green economy, social economy into more the green economy, but also from a stakeholder value perspective, this type of project. Thank you very much, Jihan, for being with us today. Now, I would like to give the floor to my friend Claudia Girardone, who is a professor in University of Essex in London, and then we have been working together also in the context of EMNES on financial inclusion, sustainable financial inclusion, and also within the digitalization thinking. Because I believe today that the region, the MENA and also Africa, is lagging behind in terms of access to finance. Before talking about sustainable finance, we need to have first access to finance. And I think this is a prerequisite. And I give the floor to Claudia to share her views with us. Claudia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen first of all, and I'd like to start by saying that I am very I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk today and in this event, and thank you very much for having me as a panelist here. So you asked me to provide some views on this topic that is very much something I'm been working on myself for a few years, and basically what I would like to highlight first is the fact that the policy roadmap highlights the key role of the financial sector, so financial intermediaries, financial markets, for the development of Mediterranean and African countries. And there are in the roadmap and the reports certainly key opportunities for reform. And as many speakers pointed out, the need of ensuring sustainability of any action that is taken for facilitating this financial sector development in these areas. So here the key message on financial inclusion and the fact that these developments cannot ignore the importance of including more people and more individuals, more firms, and also financial literacy, which is linked obviously to that. And there's a clear focus on the digitalization. Now, the policy document stresses the importance of opening access, both for households, but also for micro, small and medium businesses. And there are, of course, many challenges. First of all, there's the cost of borrowing, but that's just one part of the equation. There are also the information asymmetries, too many people unbanked, and financial illiteracy. And there's a lot of informal sector that makes the system over-reliant on cash, which obviously is something that we find very often in emerging and developing economies. But with the digitalization, clearly, there is also an opportunity to increase transparency, because, and this is obviously falling really well into the TRIS agenda for a more inclusive financial development in these countries. And for firms, obviously, what has been pointed out as one of the key problems is one of the collateral requirements that often are too high for firms, and that's something that certainly needs tackling. Now, with the COVID,
Claudia, can you speak louder, because some participants, they don't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Or be closer to the micro.
Okay, so maybe I'll change my, okay, let me just change my,
Okay, Claudia, don't
can you
worry.
hear me now?
Yeah, now it's better. Yes, now
Okay,
it's better.
is it better? Okay, so maybe it's the microphone that didn't. Okay, sorry about this. So basically, the digitalization has a crucial role now, in particularly during the COVID pandemic, and this is well highlighted in the reports, particularly to reach the unbanked, the more vulnerable groups, and also the small businesses. So this is clearly because the pandemic has limited the human interaction, the mobility, the business operations. And if we think about the banks, many banks have closed their branches, and there's been also these ideas that perhaps using cash could be problematic. So I feel that with the pandemic, there's been a shift to technology that has been quite sudden, in many respects, and that can be certainly a positive thing of, if we may think about that as a positive thing, that people had to shift to technology and try to learn to use it quickly. So it's a kind of a positive shock. But at the same time, many have not managed to be agile enough to learn and or to have access to these technologies. So what I would like to point out is that the policy that in the documents is informed by several studies that show that information technology and digitalization are key drivers of financial inclusion, and they've been found to be really good to make a difference in providing not only digital payment services like mobile banking, but also for example, this is very interesting, the fact of using post offices as points where the staff in the post office can be retrained to offer essential financial services, and the fact that they are everywhere, they can in a way be used as substitute of bank branches, but also automatic tellers machines. And then of course the fact that also banks and insurance companies need to make a greater effort to provide these basic financial digital services, including digital lending. So here there's certainly a need for sustainable and affordable financial literacy initiatives, and I mean the reports highlight how much small businesses still paying checks or use cash, and that clearly needs a shift towards more digital means. And many countries in the areas in the Mediterranean have shifted already, or are shifting, like examples of Jordan and Tunisia and Egypt, and there are some really good example of good practice that are identified. So just to conclude, basically what I think is that there are many, I mean, the digital financial inclusion is certainly key to financial development, but there are also many challenges. So in terms of applicability, which is one of the things that is extremely important, I see that on one hand, the pandemic has provided the opportunity of, you know, sort of positive technology shock, because everyone had to try to shift and learn quickly, both individuals and businesses, but many have been left behind, and what is key to this shift is the infrastructure. And I think this is really important. If the internet doesn't work well, if the microphone doesn't work, in this case, you know, if the infrastructure doesn't give what is needed, and particularly in remote areas, then this is a real issue. And one thing that I would like perhaps to think more about is, once you know, we think about a transformation over the longer term, is obviously the risks associated with this shift. So if we think about the cyber risks, which are the most classic risks that can be found, but also we should think about how to protect consumers who are maybe not as alert, or they're not so literate that to see a scam or problems of money laundering, and also it's not trivial, I think, market power as well. The fact that there is a risk that some firms may find opportunities to get too much market power, and that obviously could affect services and consumers. So many apologies for my for my start that was a bit wobbly with my microphone, but that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for
Thank you, Claudia, for your feedback on financial inclusion. And I think we have inscribed financial inclusion as one of the pillars of a TRIS economic model, because in fact, and then digital financial inclusion, which is in fact under work. We have produced a paper on this, but then we have a webinar next week to further elaborate the concept of digital financial inclusion, which will give further access and democratize the access of finance via digital tools, or what we call them modern tools, using the terminology also of Pantelis on the financial side. Because if you don't have money, you don't have access pretty much to anything. So so this work will continue. Of course, I will continue with you and with your colleagues to develop this thinking about a inclusive and sustainable finance. Of course, sustainability, it's another dimension which we are continuing to working on it in the upcoming months going forward. So now I would like to give the floor to Roger, my friend Roger, from director at EMED. EMED has been an icon for the Barcelona process, and I think we have today, you know, the possibility to share with you the TRIS transition model and blue transition scenario, which you know very well because you've been interacting with us on this for some time. Also, Roger, he is a member of the advisory board of EMEA, so with his expertise, we really interacted a lot on the aspects on the Euromed partnership and integration. And then also EMED has been doing a lot of work on these aspects for Euromed integration. Roger, you are the last speaker. I know, I'm sorry for the delay, but the discussion has been very interesting for us to improve our models. And this was really a great opportunity to have all the panelists and to have you with us. Please, Roger, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rim, and I'm honored and happy to be the last speaker, the one that is basically pressed not to be too long, so that the conclusions can go on and we can close such a fantastic webinar. First of all, I'd like to thank EMEA and Rim in particular for such an invitation. To be honest, after such an enriching debate and discussions, there is little to add. But I'll try my best to be a little bit original. This is, I believe, the third round of discussions that we hold all together on the Blue Transition Policy Roadmap, and I'm, as I said before, I'm very happy to be part of this process and of this community. In essence, I believe that such a policy roadmap serves as a perfect regional policy response to the UN 2030 agenda. There have been some references during your presentation to the 2030 agenda, but I will go more in depth. As you very well know, the UN 2030 agenda sets 17 goals and 169 targets covering all major environmental, social, and economic challenges. Similarly, I have to say the Blue Transition Policy Roadmap offers an array of policy responses for policymakers and stakeholders that, if implemented, would for sure help achieve the 2030 agenda. More importantly, the policy responses offered by the Blue Transition Policy Roadmap can help offset the systemic crisis that we suffer in the Mediterranean region at the moment and for the last years. In fact, the last report on the state of the SDGs in the Mediterranean countries shows clearly that as of today, none of the Mediterranean countries is on track to reach these goals. And in fact, when preparing this presentation, I looked at the progress indicators for all sustainable goals in each Mediterranean country released by the Sustainable Network Solutions Network. And I noticed that the most alarming performances concern the state of the environment. Both SDG 14, which is life below water, and SDG 15, life on land, are those that are performing worst. The region also faces major challenges related to social integration, as mentioned by SDG 5, which is gender equality, and as it was highlighted by Carlos before, and SDG 10, reduce inequality, which appears to be growing in both international and intra-regional terms, and which remains a major impediment towards regional integration. Another critical area concerns agriculture and diets, as represented by SDG 2, Zero Hunger, with a need to increase agricultural performance, and SDG 8, Decent Work, as Dr. Eckehart from ILO was pointing out. On the other hand, SDG 9, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure, SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, and SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, also require massive public and private investments in research and development, education, green infrastructure, sustainable value chains, healthy cities, and low carbon industries. To this end, promoting, as you are actually advocating, a circular, inclusive, green, and blue economy in the Mediterranean is a priority at the regional scale. In other SDGs, such as SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, and SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, the Mediterranean region is doing slightly better than other developing regions. As I said, the Blue Transition Policy Roadmap offers a comprehensive set of responses to tackle most of the SDGs. Allow me now to focus on the issue of regional cooperation and multi-stakeholders partnerships, like the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership, which is promoted precisely by the last of the SDGs, SDG 17, because here the Mediterranean region is clearly lagging behind. Despite regional intergovernmental institutions such as the Union for the Mediterranean and regional multilateral environmental agreements such as the 1976 Barcelona Convention, which are of utmost importance and which are more necessary than ever before, the relevance of the challenges I have just outlined require an update in terms of capacity and power competencies at the regional level. The European Union has launched new regional initiatives and financial instruments such as the WestMed for the blue economy, PRIMA, which is dealing with water cooperation, research and food security, or important financial instruments such as the External Investment Plan. But in my view, it is necessary to strengthen the regional governance framework at the level of the Mediterranean region. As you know, this year marks the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona process. It was recalled by URIM and also by the Secretary General of the Union for the Mediterranean, which was the first truly overarching Euro-Mediterranean policy. So a good excuse to move things forwards, I believe, well, if the pandemic allows it, and especially now, we should find the political bulk and the political mobilization to move things forward. Another challenge when it comes to achieving the SDGs is in the Mediterranean region is the distance between science, government, and business and civil society, which is in essence what the SDG 17 is about. An effective and robust governance structure that promotes better interaction between science, policy-making, society is a core instrument to support well-informed environmental decision-making, while also engaging the right actors in achieving the SDGs. EMEA, I believe, can also serve this purpose by promoting more and more, as it already does, this convergence of views between science, policy-making, and civil society. The TRIS development model is already a reflex, is a vision of that. And considering the mounting challenges that we as citizens of the Mediterranean are facing at the moment, EMEA should continue playing this role, I believe, more and more. It remains clear that at current pace, the Mediterranean region will miss the implementation of the 2030 agenda. In relation with the status quo of 1995, we are in the business as usual scenario, in the best case, or we are moving towards the red transition scenario in the worst case. Yet, I believe that we have an opportunity for the region to drastically change the current status quo and implement an ambitious agenda, driving the shift towards a more inclusive, environmentally friendly, and fair development. That is the TRIS model embedded in the BTS scenario, and that is in the blue transition scenario, and that is part of the work ahead of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. I think a great conclusion.
This is like a wrap-up. It's a wrap-up.
That's what I was about to say. It's a really great wrap-up that you helped me to before closing, and we are a bit late, of course. So I just wanted to conclude of this first stakeholder dialogue meeting. So it means that, yes, I agree with you. This is the third. But then this is the first after we finalized our work. So we had to test the model, because when we discussed it in June last year, we were still developing the core ideas. So it was a test meeting, a test opportunity for us to improve the work we did. And then we now published it in April. Now it's our first step to interact it into the implementation of the actors in the region. So that's the overall thing. So yes, I know that we have been working a lot on this for the past 4 years, and each time we had a lot of discussions about the feasibility and the practicality of the framework, and that was our main concern from the beginning. But now when I saw the implementation that we have done it already, not only on the areas I mentioned before, but also on countries. And this can also be extended to regions. And of course, as research is a never-ending story. So we will continue, probably. I mean, the first exercise we started in 2009, together with Carlos and Pantelis. We developed that thinking about Mediterranean 2030, and then, of course, the blue transition, the red transition. I absolutely agree with Ingrid. She left now, that we are in between the blue and also the green in some areas, and the red. If we take, for example, the unfortunate and the sad cases of Syria, of Libya, and also of Israel and Palestine, latest conflict, and so on. So there are pockets of conflict in the region which in fact pushes some part of it into the conflict area, and then there are aspects of security and stability that are really seriously questioned into this. But then there are also pockets of blue transition, and that gives us the hope, and even further hope is the green transition, or the green prospects. But then what we're also trying to do in the blue transition scenario is to really encompass all of this in a vision, what we call it the blue transition vision, based on the TRIS model. And this is what we are trying to develop, and we are trying to implement in a certain way. So I would like to ask Kinga, please, can you put the slide number 13 of my presentation, because I would like to I would like to conclude and provide the next steps. So until Kinga puts this slide, I would like, first of all, to let you know that this blue transition movement, what we call it, because we have now a number of researchers and also experts and collaborators who are working with us on this blue transition research and activities. And the next activity that we will do would be, of course, to continue these dialogues based on very specific topics, because now it's a bit generic today as the first dialogue, but we will continue also to monitor where are we in terms of the blue transition scenario. And the next step would be to develop the blue transition outlook, which is based on a work that we have done. So there will be a book coming in the next few months, which integrates all these aspects that we have been talking about in an organized framework, and then trying to really to continue monitoring the blue transition scenario within this TRIS model, but probably also with the adaptations that will be made to the TRIS model. So I think Kinga could not put the slide, which is okay. I will continue without slides. And what I would also like to share with you is that you will be involved in the the updates. Today we also are trying to publish our work on regional integration, which is in fact embedded into all of this, but then we have already moved the research onto inscribing the TRIS into the regional integration model. So this is slowly is a work that we are developing over time. And then I think with this, okay, now she is managing great. So slide number 13, just to give an idea where we're going in the next months as part of our process. As mentioned by Sensia today, it is a process. It is what I call a process that will put all of us into thinking together for this blue transition of the Mediterranean, and this is the outlook that we are talking about. Carlo and I will start the work, I think, in summer. I mean, since this summer we are all still not able to travel as much as we could travel before. So this is a great opportunity to continue to travel mentally rather than physically through diving through this blue transition in the Mediterranean. So I would like to thank all the panelists. I would like to thank the Union for Mediterranean and the GIZ for co-organizing this great dialogue with you. Thank you for making the time to share these views with us. I would like also to thank the audience, the participants. At the beginning was that we wanted to have this interaction face-to-face, but then in a small group. But then later on I said, I think the discussion will most probably benefit whoever has the time and whoever is interested by this debate. So we opened it to a number of participants. Also in the participants, I can see that many of our colleagues from EMEA, from EMNES, who are making the time for this for this debate. So thank you very much for everybody who has contributed not only to the construction of the blue transition scenario and TRIS model within the EMNES process, but also whoever has been contributing as expert and as collaborator over these years. And we will continue, as I mentioned in one of the previous slides, which is go back to slide number 8, and I will close on that. We will continue number 8, Kinga, you hear me? So we are all ready to continue this blue transition, with Carlo, we called it a movement, but I'm afraid of the word movement because it doesn't inspire me much. But then, okay, let's say we have a target that we would like to achieve, and then hopefully we will all together be able to work on this philosophy, on this model and framework. Thank you very much for all of you, and I hope to see you soon. Maybe we can have a group picture. Yes, that's I know that's what makes George very happy. So a group picture. You let me know when it's not needed anymore, okay? So whoever is on the participant list as well, Kinga, give them access so we can have the group picture as always. So these are the new tricks after the meetings, virtual meetings, which we didn't have them before. Kinga, please give access to the audience so then we can have the pictures all together. Yes, great. So at least we have the names. So then please take the pictures and then.
It's a big picture.
Yes, it's a big picture, but it's fine. I mean, at least we have everybody over there. At least I can see George, I can see Consuelo, I can see Cynthia, I can see Ahmed. So although all these our partners who have contributed to this great exercise that we will continue, Carlo, right?
Nice to see also Consuelo from the Metro Times.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, Consuelo.
Hello, Carlo and Pantelis.
Yes.
How nice to see you. Wonderful.
Yes. We are still here on the same topic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Back. Oh, we are all back. Metro.
Yes.
We are all back. Yeah.
Okay. So, is the picture done or not yet?
You should shift to the video for those that are not, if they can.
They can, it's okay. I mean, but at least we have the
names.
Yes, we have the names. It's okay. Okay, thank you very much all, and then we will connect again.
Thank you. Thank you, Rima.
Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Looking forward.
Bye-bye.
Looking forward.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.